Okay, so I think we're at the part of the agenda where everyone's waiting to hear Dan, and I don't, oh, there he is, okay. But first I'd like to, sorry, I want to call your associate Sarah up to the podium to introduce you, but Sarah is the Director of Education for the Walkable and Livable Communities Institute.
The new Partners for Smart Growth gave Dan their first ever Lifetime Achievement Award based on this work. In 2001, Time magazine named Dan one of the top 6 civic innovators in the world. In 2001, the Transportation Research Board honored Dan as a distinguished lecturer. In 2009, he was named as one of the top 100 urban thinkers of all time. He has served an advisory role for the Federal Highway Administration, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, United States DOT, EPA, HUD. For 16 years, he served as the first bicycle and pedestrian coordinator in the United States, the first ever position. It set the model for all other states to follow. In 1996, he and his wife Liz founded Walkable Communities, and since then, Dan has personally helped more than 3,500 communities around the world become more walkable and livable. In 2009, he co-founded the Walkable and Livable Communities Institute because, as he has always said, it's mission over money. We need to get people back on their feet to improve quality of life and health. And we have typically overlooked the impacts of the built environment on our public health. In the past 30 years, childhood obesity has tripled. Antidepressants are the most prescribed medication in the United States at present. We have obesity and its related diseases costing us about $270 billion per year. And, this is unacceptable. So, since 2009, the Walk Institute has donated about $300,000 in services to disadvantaged communities who can't afford to do the work to improve the built environment, to make it, to improve quality of life. And we've leveraged about $150,000 in grant donations for these communities, which has brought $400,000 to them to effect change. If you Google Dan, I mean, this is just the tip of the surface. If you Google Dan, you'll see his achievements from Hemis Tour to Bike Centennial to the Trans-American Trail. But more than that, he is probably the loveliest person you'll ever get to meet. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Dan.
Aloha, Maui. I feel like I'm among the greatest collection of friends I've ever had together. So the very great specialness of being here my third time, and hopefully just the beginning, is really to celebrate what you're doing with your leaders, your willingness to try new things, and to make sure that we begin correcting for the sins, the omissions of the past, is really why we're all together. I used to shoot for National Geographic, and it's hard for me to talk without photos. And I like to tell stories. I think the two work well together. If you imagine the gentleman standing on the left, by the way, he's not standing in a real place. That's Disney World. But this is what he imagines the world to be, a place where people care for their children and watch over them, that details get worked out. But the reality has become something much harsher, much more stark, and much more unforgiving. Now, here's the pickle that we've gotten ourselves into and where we would love to change our built environment. And the good news is that everything I'm showing you here today is doable and it's going to make money. And I'm very serious about that. When we were only building transportation for one purpose, to move cars, we were really spending a lot of money. And although it had an effect on the economy for a long time, the economy has changed. And now, the more we build for people, the more we'll reinvigorate our economy, not only building personal health, but also community health and financial health. And truly, it's going to be a tough act. I don't want to make this sound easy because we've got institutions and banks and ways of doing things that are very well established. But it's the only thing we can do if we want a healthy future. So our goal, all of us, is to overcome fear of change. And we can do it, and I'm going to prove that we can. And we have to have many partners. The folks who built this road, who were primarily only thinking of one function, that is moving the greatest number of cars through intersections and along a corridor, and not really giving alternatives. It's important to understand, though, that those who are the true pioneers out there ahead of us are our teachers. The gentleman I'm shaking hands with is Dan Buettner himself, the author of Blue Zones. Dan and I share something in common. We call one another brothers. We both rode bicycles from Alaska to Argentina. And Dan has gone on to identify why people live longer and healthier in certain hot spots in the world referred to as blue zones, and that's the name of his book. But Dan called me one day and basically said, we want you to help us reinvent Albert Lee, Minnesota. Small town, 20,000 folks. And we came in, we were in charge of the built environment. Others were in charge of nutrition and spirituality and lifestyles and several other things. But the net result was, 3 years later, documented throughout world press, is we added 2.5 years of life to every person in that town on average. We also cut the health care costs in all of those organizations they could track, county, city, state, by 50%. And this is what we're talking about. It's going to be hard. It's essential. And here's where we got ourselves into the pickle. We basically said to ourselves under early transportation that when we run out of capacity, we build more pavement and build more of our systems. But maybe 20 years ago, there were some pioneers that said that's not working. And so we're going to use a lateral approach. We're going to move less cars. We'll keep the same cars moving, but we're going to now move people. And once you start to focus on moving people, you're building health and you're building a sustainable transportation program that works and keeps paying off. In the upper left panel, strips will eventually convert to villages. They'll be small, and not every strip will be converted. There were so many that got built, but those that do get built will be built in the right place, and they'll produce the greatest new income and reduce the greatest number of trips by car and increase the greatest number of trips, what we call active transportation. This is what it will look like. It happens to be one of my favorite streets in America. It's State Street. It's in Santa Barbara. That used to be 4 lanes, and it was a fairly mean street. Santa Barbara was one of the pioneers, but they are proving to us that you can turn a street into a gold mine if you start to focus on people first. Now, if we do this, we're going to have other measures of our success. Today, we've tasked the engineer with measuring virtually everything in the beaker of cars. The more cars you move, or the less delay, the more rewards you get. What we're now saying is our rewards also now have to include, and when you think of complete streets, we have to have the new metrics. How many children do we see? How many elders do we see? How many people are out walking, and how many people are now using their parks and their open spaces? I started this journey quite a number of years ago when I was 20. And it was for this reason, that I read the last great writing of John Steinbeck, Travels with Charlie, the story of he and his pet poodle, Charlie, traveling across America. And it was toward the end of that book that John Steinbeck said something that stuck with me and will stay with me forever. America is out of sync with its values. We think about that. Where are we spending our money? And if we really evaluate it, we do have the highest standard of living of any large nation on earth. But we're dropping in our quality of life. We're now 38th, and we're expected to go much lower. And what quality of life is or means many things, but one of the most important is access to health, access to travel and choose among the ways we'd like to go. So if anyone were to bother and look out the side windows of their cars, this is what they see. This is a resort town. It's North Lake Tahoe. And the people there are still fighting over whether or not they'll build their sidewalks. But this is the aloha spirit. I took these pictures during my stay here these last 2 weeks. And it's what inspires me personally, is that from the very earliest inquiry for a child walking a beach to those who are looking for the great rays of sun and water, that it really brings a new spirit to us. So as I look for images, I'm looking for those that show children being able to do things that become natural, that families take walks with their children. And if we're to do all these things, and this is why I'm so grateful to be here with you, it's a matter of having leaders that we celebrate and giving those leaders support, not just with awards, very important to do that, but to also honor our leaders by giving them the strength and the support from the grassroots up. You've got what I would like to say, the perfect storm for solving problems, all lining up, or one might say the right solar orientation, where people who get it, who know the language, who are ready to celebrate with you, so they're going to need your backing, and they're going to need it in every conceivable way as you go forward and put all of the pieces together. And truly, hearing the words spoken, as your mayor was able to just do. But here's where I want to add to that. We took, I don't know, Aaron, it must have been 60 walking audits this last 2 weeks. Something like that, yeah. But every single walk, we heard more inspirations, more stories, more willingness to back new policies and start to revitalize and bring to life each of our communities. Now, I don't want to go into a lot of technical detail because it's just unnecessary. What we really need to do is convey the spirit of what we're trying to achieve so we can go ahead and build in walkability, livability, healthy lifestyles. But as you read through these, I think you're going to see it's all common sense. It's what we've been doing as people for tens of thousands of years, and all we're now trying to do is to get that back by following our hearts. But let me point out a few problems along the way. The upper street is in Houston, Texas. That's where I'm going to be starting Monday. That's going to be a tough act. It really is, especially after Maui. But the point is, these homes are worth a fortune because of the design of the street. This is a walkable neighborhood. And anyone goes to sell their home, it goes very fast and it goes at very high prices. This street, by functional classification, is exactly the same. They both carry about the same amount of traffic. We way overbuilt our streets because we set standards that today we won't be able to meet. We won't be able to maintain even. And this one produces very lethal results. If you build a street this bad, no developer in the right mind would face a home onto this street. They would be stupid to do that. And people drive fast as a result. And no one really wants to walk there. And I think, again, am I right about this, folks? It really is common sense. This is not something you have to have attended engineering school for 16 years to do. We're not going to look at the smaller we make a road to still perform its mission totally is the way to go. This is a 60-foot right-of-way. That's all we had to work with. And we said we're going to work from the outside in. We start with the most basic, simple, affordable transportation, and we continue through with really good design. We're able to move a huge number of cars. By the way, this road can move up to 20,000 cars as long as you design your intersections correctly. And it can move a lot of people walking, biking, using transit, and it can provide shade, and it adds value to a neighborhood. This is a pretty simple concept. Now, if we're to do this, it's also a partnership. Notice the streets on the left, all the pattern is what we're building today. The streets are disconnected. You have to come down to the principal road in order to do anything, even to get up another road to go back into the neighborhood in a disconnected area. And that pattern, if you count the rooftops, if you count the amount of commerce, you're going to see a contrast between doing it the way on the other side, which, by the way, the same number of rooftops, but now we mix the uses. And by mixing the uses and keeping the linkages in, we can keep the trips 60 to even 90% internal. So we're not having to go out and rebuild the big road each time we add more development. The scene on the left is conventional, and the scene on the top is traditional. And which one makes a lot more money? Which ones do the homes sell soon, fast, turnover well? It's now traditional. It's the oldest way you've been building. So when you're thinking of the very center of your villages, that's the way they were built. But a lot of Maui now looks like this. It's walled in. You can't get to the street, but if you could, there's no one to watch you. And the motors know that, and the motors drive faster than they should. You can post it at 20, but that's not what you're going to get. The street reads differently. So let's take a theoretical condition. You happen to live there. You want to visit a friend. Your friend happens to live there. How do you get there? You don't if you're a child. And so mom or dad drives you and then drives back, and then 2 hours later comes, picks you up, and then drives back. That's 4 trips because we didn't connect those 2 neighborhoods. So let's talk about trips and how we get rid of trips and build community at the same time. I think you can see on the left, if we use a disconnected system, when you want to go somewhere, it requires 6 different trips. On the right-hand side, because we have connectivity and you are able to circulate, now you're down to only 2 trips, and they're typically very compact. So you have a choice of walking, biking, or driving, or using transit. Now here comes the hard part. I really want to focus on this. A state DOT, Michigan DOT, in Sault Ste. Marie, wonderful little town, very small, and when they wanted to build sidewalks for the children, they had the money, it was set aside. The neighbors came out in force to kill the project. 300 people came to say, if you put in sidewalks, we will no longer be rural. We have to understand what rural is. We have to understand what a village is, what urban is, and be very clear in our own minds that if we want healthy kids, we have to have a clear and precise language and support it and defend it. Because people who don't come to work sessions are willing to kill that. And by the way, even though there's a sidewalk on this side, how do you get to it? You don't. And so I'm going to share with you some incredible success stories. And this is the message that we were sharing earlier today with your mayor, one that we're imparting to all of you as leaders. And that is, if you want to build a good road and meet the public need and do it well, then it's going to require a new public process. We can't have people come out at the very end and kill a project that staff has worked hard on, that your elected leaders have really, really put their careers online, so to speak, and not have the public come and defend it. You have to build that public process, or everything I'm showing you is a pipe dream, and it really is. So this is a wonderful example. The public works director of this town, who later became the city manager, Sammamish, Washington, known as the bedroom for the boardroom, pulled together a charrette. It's a very interactive process. It takes about 10 days. On Father's Day weekend, we launched the charrette, and then the county told the public works director, it will take you 10 years just to get the permits through. Ben Yazizi didn't believe that. And working with the people, he had the bulldozers moving in 330 days. By doing that, I've gone back and checked this. Had they waited 10 years, this project would have been unaffordable. When they built it, they had the right resources to get it on the ground, and truly that's what we're talking about. Right now, we have this wonderful opportunity, while the economy allows us to get a lot on the ground at affordable rates. Now to do it, after you finish the charrette, the public process, you need graphics that are so visual, so easy to interpret and understand that anyone knows what they're allowed to build and why they should be building what the town vision calls for. San Luis Obispo did that. Within 15 years, they had everything on the ground. And this town is making buku bucks, and it's now listed as the happiest town in America. And why? I think, well, they have sunshine, but you do too. They have good climate. I think it's because people learn to work together, that they're passionate about being part of their community, that there's good public process and truly graphics that people understand. Now, if we're to build something that brings in good money, in this case for the developer and obviously for the tax base, then what we build across the street cannot be ugly. So this building got built second. What's on the other side of the street? Affordable housing, but done with great attraction and great support from the neighborhood so that the next developer who comes in can build something that's still in harmony and actually makes good money because what got built first is not going to destroy land value. Do you see how it all ties together? Both of these intersections will handle traffic, about the same number. In fact, this is somewhat theoretical because they're not in the place where this one needs to handle the biggest amount. But when we crunch numbers for a roundabout, you can see it's smaller. You can see it's easier to walk. It also reduces 90% of personal injury crashes and minimizes delay. They don't cost the same. Right now, because everybody's familiar with building the big intersection, assuming that there's no cost of buying real estate, that's cheaper. But the roundabout, because it's smaller, it takes less material. Once the construction companies and the engineering companies become familiar with it, it will be cheaper. And so the piloting of new ideas will be applied, and you will become leaders in this for all of Hawaii. I can guarantee that. High Street and Main Street, we've already tested it. That can be a great roundabout, a full-size, full-scale roundabout. And now your government center comes together as a unified place for people to come to, and rather than sit there and worry about whether they're going to make it through the intersection that time or not. So having less of one thing means having more of something else. And it's such a simple formula, but as I think you're starting to see, it requires more collaboration, more willingness to bring everybody together to have this because everybody's used to that. But that's what's causing us to go crazy. I've got stuck in traffic 4 times now on this trip where I didn't move for like 20 minutes. In one place, going into Paia, over 40 minutes wait to get to the traffic signal there. By the way, we've modeled everything out and they all work. Everything I'm showing you really works. But a number of themes emerged during our 2 weeks here. One of them is that your future is going to rest on restoring and perfecting and honoring your central villages. And to do that, to understand what you're really doing is building place. And as you build place, you're going to attract jobs. We were delighted that as we went through these emerging themes with the Public Works Department and the Planning Department working in harmony and really willing to try new ideas, new thoughts, I'm ready to declare I have never seen such close collaboration in any of the cities I've worked on. This is fantastic that you guys are doing that. And as we express our ideas to some of the residents alongside, what did this fellow say, Sarah? Hopefully it related to what we were doing.
Yeah, he was very supportive.
He's the gentleman who rented me my car after I found out that there weren't any cars to be rented on the island. But we need to decide what we want less of and what we want more of, knowing that they perform different functions, and then bring them to life till we have models. We need to try new tools. Notice their motors is really coming close to the cyclist, and doing so because there's a double yellow line. If we go to a different concept, and this is one we're trying out a number of places in the country with fabulous results, saving paint, we're able to put in paint to buffer to the sidewalk. So the motorists aren't hugging next to the cyclists. And by the way, the speeds come down. And now more children are able to walk to school. How many cars can you handle where you've taken out the center lanes? We don't know, but we know from a threshold level, the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices says you can't go above 6,000 in an urban area, which is fine. Most of your roads that have double yellow that are in the neighborhoods don't get anywhere near that. So this is Brattleboro in Maine, and look at all the traffic and the types of traffic, and they're purposely leaving out the center lines and finding good results. We can also, what I call double stripe, so that we are able to get a lower speed by the motorist and more support for walking and bicycling, as you can see here. Another theme, and this is really the one I want to get to and leave in your memory, is how communities through the charrette you're just now completing, Waialuku, that we've found great support. Ideas emerge that should give everyone who works with staff and elected leaders a wonderful vote of confidence that the directions that your instincts are leading you are the exact same ways that your citizens wish to go. Now there's another tool I want to introduce, and it's referred to as a mini roundabout. It's not raised. It's got maybe a 3-inch rise. This you could do at the intersection of Market and Main. We've already tested it and it will fit. This gives you a lower speed, handles the traffic better, keeps it moving, and now gives you a gateway entry into your principal marketing street. Other places you could do this, you can do it in Paia. You can do it in most of the communities we looked at. Quickly, I want to talk about what we've done to our children when it comes to getting them to school. How many of you, when you were children, walked or bicycled to school? Most hands. How many of you today have children or grandchildren that walk or bike to school? We're down to just Mike. Is that it? Several? Yeah. This is our problem. We have created a mess. We failed to put schools in the right locations in some cases. We have avoided putting in the sidewalks, the systems, and the parents are trying to rush their children to school. And those mixes just don't work. So here are some of the tools we're now incorporating, putting in crossings. This one's only 8 feet if you only measure the asphalt, which is what the motor sees. But the engineers who did this said, we want that illusion. In order to do it, we're going to widen the gutter pans. And it works. The motors slow down and they yield. Another tool, why not put much of your parking for your very small, very sensitive villages out away from the center? But then have really good trolleys that are constantly waiting. As you're loading one, the other one just pulled out. Have good shelters along the way. I've seen a real paucity of transit shelters, especially ones that are creative like this one. And then use very affordable, very simple to operate tugs, we call them. This one's being used in Honolulu. It's been used forever. The Japanese brought these to Honolulu. Your whole family slides onto the bench. There's no length of time in getting on board or exiting. And then finally, with the policy and implementation, with a group of folks getting together to talk about, okay, what are our next steps? We'll do that later today, and put forth new ideas. And they may be simple ideas to start with, like over time rewriting your code so that you have buildings that you do want to walk past, and now supporting higher land use and better land use. But the real key, and this is absolutely true, every project I've ever worked on that has turned out to be gold in terms of getting the people to walk and to bike and do all things has used this very engaging civic process. And I'm just going to leave you with a couple of thoughts that you want your goals to be designed, whatever you're doing in transportation, to increase safety. That should be paramount. Now, we've said that, but we're not doing it. We don't have the action plan in place to do it. But this is the other goal I really want to leave with you. We now need, in your general plan, an entire chapter devoted to how do we design for health. And in doing that, not only do you have that chapter as a standalone chapter, but it references back to every element in your entire general plan so that when you're reading, say, about parking, you're already seeing the health aspects. So I really appreciate the time I've had in front of you today. The easy work is done, but I'm very confident that from here on out, you're going to know the importance, you're going to find the passion, and understand that what you're about to do is going to be building on the success of your past, tapping into the excellence of your leadership, your elected leaders, your staff, your community leaders, and going to allow you to create the setting where Maui is going to make ripples around the world. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.